mean to start off my remarks by commenting on this situation of closing debate and calling the question, but this is an absolute shambles, Mr. Speaker, making a mockery of what is supposed to be an important debate amongst members. Most of us have the right to have a free vote on this issue. Right. They are making a mockery of this place, Mr. Speaker, and I, for one, am not impressed. Not impressed at all. Now, to get back to the topic at hand, I think it is important that we have meaningful debate on this issue, and I want to participate on behalf of myself and my constituents, and I'm sure there are many other members of Parliament who want to do the same thing, Mr. Speaker. This is a very important legislation for our country, and of course, members of our caucus, the Conservative caucus, have been very active in the run-up to this debate, Mr. Speaker. We have had some serious reservations leading up to how this bill was to be written, and those reservations were expressed in a dissenting report from the Special Joint Committee that studied the subject. Now, of course, many of us are relieved that the legislation echoed some of the recommendations included in the dissenting report, such as certain limits on minors, and of course, many of us do believe that there has to be, according to the Supreme Court ruling, some provision in our law for dying with dignity. But we do have some concerns, and I'm going to express my own regarding aspects of this bill.
Unfortunately, this bill opens a door to assisted suicide for people with mental illness, and that is of concern to us.
Includes a provision for psychological suffering. This opens a large door. I'm worried about how this would apply to the mentally ill. How will this be applied in reality? Are we going down some slippery slope by including this provision for psychological suffering? I'm sure that there will be an approach to amend this particular section, but right now, the amendment to the Criminal Code would add that illness, disease, or disability, or that state of decline causes them enduring physical or psychological suffering that is intolerable to them and that cannot be relieved under conditions that they consider acceptable. This is the concerning provision, and I echo my other colleagues who have raised this issue as well. Le Québec est doté de sa...
Quebec brought in its own legislation on this issue, and in the Quebec version, only people over 18 with serious, incurable physical illnesses whose medical state is deemed an advanced state of irreversible decline can request medical assistance in dying.
Must assure that his or her patient has clearly consented to physician-assisted dying, ensuring, amongst other things, that it is not the result of external pressure, Mr. Speaker, providing that the patient with a full prognosis on the condition and possible treatment options, along with likely consequences. The physician under the Quebec law must also ensure the continuation of consent with interviews with the patient held at different times, spaced by a reasonable time, having regard for the patient's condition. Mr. Speaker, I would put it to you that these are appropriate safeguards in the Quebec law. I would like to see similar safeguards in the Canadian law. Another concern to us is in relation to the rights of conscience of physicians and health institutions. Le droit de conscience du personnel médical.
The rights of conscience of physicians and health institutions concerns us.
Section 2 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms guarantees all Canadians freedom of conscience and religion. The dissenting report clearly states that there was near unanimous agreement amongst the witnesses that physicians who objected in taking part in physician-assisted dying or for reasons of conscience should not be forced to do so. Although not obliged directly by this legislation to provide PAD, the obligation to refer patients through an effective referral infringes on the spirit, and I would say the letter, of Section 2 of the Charter. I therefore believe that such a regime is unnecessary, and note that Canada would be the first jurisdiction in the world to require an effective referral regime. I believe that there are better models that would protect charter rights of physicians and provide access to physician-assisted dying. But under this legislation, physicians who conscientiously object to physician-assisted dying are required to provide information to their patients on how to access PAD and to advise the government of his or her patient's request. I believe this is unfair. It's unfair to the physician, certainly, and this legislation does not sufficiently protect physicians' rights. I also believe that healthcare institutions that object to offering physician-assisted dying or related services should be exempted in accordance with the Supreme Court's determination that individual collective aspects of freedom of religion and conscience guaranteed under the Charter are indissolubly intertwined. So, in my home province of Ontario, Mr. Speaker, the current policy of the College of Physicians and Surgeons is that it is a requirement not only to refer, but also to provide services that are within the standard of care of an emergency situation. Therefore, passing this legislation would mean, without passing it with conscience protection, would mean that PAD would enter the standard of care and would fit within the existing policy framework of the College of Physicians and Surgeons in Ontario, Mr. Speaker. It means that in my jurisdiction, there will be an effective right to force the physician to be part of this process, even when she or he does not want to be part of this process. So, Mr. Speaker, this is of major and grave concern to me and to physicians in my constituency as well. The other issue that should concern us is whether this legislation respects the Charter decision and would survive a challenge. I would put it to you that there is sufficient and grave cause to understand that this may not be the case, and I would put it to my honourable colleagues. If we cannot pass legislation that could survive a Charter challenge, why are we going through this process in the first place? Again, it makes a mockery of the situation, Mr. Speaker, and I'm hopeful that the government, as this bill moves forward, would accept amendments to ensure that everyone's charter rights are respected, whether they be physicians, medical personnel, and the charter rights of vulnerable persons as well, Mr. Speaker. We owe it to Canadians to get this right the first time, to protect the conscience rights of physicians and health professionals while respecting the parameters of the Carter decision. Les Canadiens et Canadiennes,
Canadians expect us to do hard work, and they want the work to be well done.
Well, I just want to acknowledge that the other point raised by my colleagues is a good one. Where's the palliative care money? Mr. Speaker, the $3 billion in funding for palliative care, no mention in the budget, Mr. Speaker. As they say sometimes in politics, as in life, the devil's in the details. Where's the funding going to come from? How's it going to be allocated? It's absolutely imperative that the government take decisive action on palliative care. Mr. Speaker, that ends my comments on this bill. But again, I want to reiterate the shenanigans that went on before I rose are absolutely unacceptable to free and democratic debate on an issue of conscience for many members of this House, for all members of this House, and I object to this motion being put forward in the way that it was. I object to the process that is being put forward by the government as they try to shut down debate of members who want to advance the positions of themselves and their constituents. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments. Question and commentaire. The honourable member for Niagara Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate the comments made by the member opposite. Question, Mr. Speaker, through you to the member. Innovative models across our nation, across Canada, are integrating palliative care approaches across the nation in a variety of settings, including the home, incorporating advanced care planning, preparing more health care, including more providers to deliver palliative care, recognizing the importance of family and friend caregivers and their needs, along with other good practices throughout our great country. My question, Mr. Speaker, through you to the member is with respecting and, of course, mentioning palliative care at the end of his comments, what other services besides those that are being practiced today throughout our nation would he recommend being put in place for this program?
Honourable member for Parry Sound Muskoka.
I thank the honourable member for his thoughtful question. Indeed, as a former provincial minister of health and federal minister of health, I think it's important that we do strike and find ways to integrate and coordinate our care for the individual. That's absolutely correct. I would also, though, mention to the honourable member that in my consultations with the palliative care infrastructure in my riding, they were not exactly thrilled with the prospect that they would be associated with physician-assisted dying. They see themselves as a place of, of a final resting place before death, as a place of hope, and as a comfort place, rather than a place where this debate over physician-assisted dying would be the focus. So I think we have to be careful. I think we need more palliative care, but we also need a process by which we get to the right conclusion in the right part of the healthcare system.
Yeah. Questions and comments? Question commentaire. The honourable member for Caribou Prince George.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate the comments from the honourable member from Parry Sound Muskoka. I wonder if he would join with me or maybe offer that perhaps the motion that we saw just previously to this may not just to be to limit the debate and the comments coming from this side, but over the course of the debate and the discussion that we've had over the last day and a bit, we've also heard some dissenting remarks from the government side as well too on this debate. So perhaps that maybe that motion is not just to stifle the debate on this side, but also on their own side within their own party. And perhaps a question to my honourable colleague from Parry Sound Muskoka if he feels the same.
Honourable member for Parry Sound Muskoka.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That same thought had crossed my head as well, Mr. Speaker, because I noticed that I was originally supposed to be speaking on this bill at 3:20 p.m. It's nowhere near that now. So the only conclusion I could have come to was that honourable members on the other side of the House, on the Liberal side of the House, were declining their speaking spots. And maybe there's some great dissension going on in the Liberal caucus right now over this bill, that all of a sudden this bill is not as popular as they thought, as the manipulators thought it was going to be on that side of the House. So now they want to shut down debate, not only on us on this side of the House, but on their own side of the House, Mr. Speaker. I find the whole thing outrageous.
Statements by members. The honourable member for Bay of Quinte.